John Lennon, singer, songwriter, leader of a musical group that led a generation. Earlier this week, he was killed. Today, New York and the world mourn. Thousands of people are gathering in Central Park to mark Lennon's death in the manner requested by the widow, Yoko Ono, with 10 minutes of silent prayer. That is scheduled for 2 this afternoon, New York time. To date, the largest gathering in Central Park was in September, 400,000 showing up for the Elton John concert. Some previous estimates put today's expected showing at 500,000, but at this point it doesn't seem that the crowd will be that large. The focus for New York's tribute to the former Beatle is the park's band shell, where music by John Lennon and the Beatles and classical pieces are being played. And situated there among our reporters is Ernie Anastos. Apparently we have a little difficulty getting that picture up from Ernie. We will do so later on. The suspected killer, Chapman, is now at Rikers Island Prison. He was taken there from Manhattan's Bellevue Hospital. There had been many threats on his life. It was feared crowds from today's vigil might cause a disturbance at the hospital. Chapman is undergoing psychiatric tests to see if he's fit to stand trial. In his last interview, John Lennon said his work would not be complete until he was dead and buried, and that he hoped that would not be for a long time. Lennon said, "I'd like to make some more records before I toss." The interview was given 7 hours before he was shot and killed in front of his apartment building, the Dakota, in New York's Manhattan. And now we can switch to the park in Ernie Anastos.
Roger, we are here, Central Park. We are not very far from the band shell, as you can see. The band shell is decorated for Christmas. And you can see a large wreath in the center of the shell, and on each side there are 2 large bouquets of flowers. And there's a picture, of course, of John Lennon wearing the New York City t-shirt. New York City has turned out for him today. There are about 125,000 people that have gathered here. I've had an opportunity to go out and chat with a lot of the folks. Some have come here from last night, others early this morning, and I must tell you that it's a strange feeling. Many of us who at one time stood in line for a Beatles movie or for a concert are here today, and a lot of us with children, and looking at each other and thinking and remembering and trying to feel something. I looked in the eyes of people who were in their 30s, and I just said, "Why are you here?" A very simple response. They said, "You know." I think that sums a lot of it up. Yoko Ono had asked for no tributes. She said she didn't want that. What she wanted was a silent prayer, a 10-minute silent prayer to pray for the soul of John Lennon. Mayor Koch has put this together. There is no ceremony planned for today. There will be no speakers. There are no speeches here. What we're listening to is amplified, recorded music, and beginning at 2 o'clock we will have the silent prayer. As far as we understand, Yoko Ono will not participate in any of the public tributes today. She remains in seclusion. She is at her West Side apartment. She is there with 5-year-old son, Sean. The outpour is something that you really have to feel. I hope you can see it through this television camera. We can sense it here. This is a gentle crowd. What they're doing, they're handing out flowers and buttons. And there are signs everywhere that we look around that says peace and love. And we will miss you, John. We remember you. That is the kind of mood, that is the kind of feeling that permeates this crowd here today. John Lennon represents music. And radio stations around the country are having a very special broadcast today. They'll be remembering the life and time of John Lennon. And we will be remembering here with interviews and more to report from Grand Central, or I should say from Central Park. Once again, back to you, Roger.
The Dakota apartment building on Manhattan's Upper West Side was the center of Lennon's life in his last years, where he lived and where he died. Today, mourners are still in front of the Dakota, maintaining a vigil that began minutes after his shooting. It was at the Dakota where Lennon played house husband for the last few years, raising his son, Sean, where wife Yoko Ono handled the Lennon's finances, the Lennon estate reportedly $250 million. And it was at the Dakota where the Lennons decided to break their silence and record their new album, Double Fantasy. The fantasy and the piece ended violently 6 days ago, also at the Dakota.
So they stepped out of the limousine, and they went inside the gate there, and then all of a sudden they heard 5, 6 shots, and that was it.
4 cops pulled John Lennon out and put him into the back of a police car, and his mouth, he was bleeding from his mouth, and it was a terrible sight.
Mr. Chapman came up behind him and called to him, Mr. Lennon, as he arrived at that doorway. And then in a combat stance, he emptied the Charter Arms .38 caliber gun that he had with him and shot John Lennon.
The news spread quickly. Within minutes, fans, the curious, and reporters are at the Dakota apartment building waiting for news from Roosevelt Hospital.
John Lennon was brought to the emergency room at the Roosevelt site, St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, this evening, shortly before 11 p.m. He was dead on arrival.
The first reaction, disbelief. Why would someone stalk and kill John Lennon? And why now, when Lennon was just coming out of 5 years of seclusion? Almost immediately, a vigil of stunned fans gathered at the Dakota.
All we are saying is give Jesus a chance. Come on, Ron!
I just told these people here I feel like the 80s have begun.
Then the questions begin. Who was this strange assassin? Witnesses say he had been hanging around outside the Dakota for days, waiting for Lennon.
So nice,
and
really,
clean cut.
And clean cut. He was, you know.
From the little bit he spoke to us, he just seemed like a really nice, genuine, honest person.
6 hours before he fired 4 shots into Lennon, Mark David Chapman asked Lennon for his autograph. He was a fan, like thousands of others, but he let fantasy go out of control. He bought a gun, flew from Hawaii to New York with $2,000. The state prosecutor charges premeditated execution. Whatever, Chapman is taken to Bellevue Hospital for 30 days of psychiatric observation. His attorney tells John Slattery Chapman seemed irrational.
Does he tell you why he shot the man?
He gave me a reason. He gave me several reasons.
Did they seem to you to be sane reasons for killing John Lennon?
Well, the result was I went out of the court and I made an application to have him examined by a couple of psychiatrists. Obviously, I didn't consider them to be sane reasons.
All week, reaction from Lennon's friends and associates. Ringo Starr flies to New York to be with Yoko Ono. In London, the man who wrote hundreds of songs with Lennon seems stunned.
I was very shocked, you know. It's terrible news.
A drag, isn't it?
Outside the Dakota, the vigil goes on as the reaction becomes overreaction. 2 suicides reported, and Yoko Ono pleads with fans not to despair and calls for today's silent vigil. In the next week, psychiatrists must decide if Chapman is fit to stand trial. Friends say he wasn't a violent man. Chapman's wife says only that she's sorry for Lennon's family.
I'm just still, again, very concerned about Mark, and I'm just very, very sorry that this had to happen to Yoko Ono and her family, and that her husband had to die.
More than 100 people were injured today in Liverpool when a vigil for John Lennon erupted into chaos. Thousands of people charging the stage where a number of bands were participating in a 7-hour concert. 30,000 fans were chanting the Lennon song, "Give Peace a Chance," when the trouble blew up. We'll be back with more of our coverage of today's vigil for John Lennon in a moment.